All right, we're back after a very long hiatus. David, thank you so much for being patient with me. We tried to do this about a year ago, and it didn't work out due to technical difficulties.
I believe I broke the equipment.
Well, it's very gracious of you to say that because I think the equipment either broke itself or I broke it. But
If you want to take responsibility, that's fine.
I will. I feel like since my name is on the podcast, I should.
Well, my pleasure for being back.
I'll thank you, David. I really appreciate it. It is a great pleasure to have with me today David Mattingly.
And great to be here, Rocco. Thank you.
Thank you, David. You will know David locally from Wave 3 News, where he is an anchor man. And he has a long history in journalism that you may not be aware of.
I don't usually wear it on my sleeve,
Indeed.
so you may not know all the places I've been and what I've done because I've always been sort of in the moment. And if you tune in and watch me on Wave, you probably think, well, he's been an anchor man for a long, long time. This is actually a pretty new change for me in my career.
Yeah, indeed. You have a history with CNN?
I was with CNN for 23 years. I was one of their go anywhere, anytime people. I was a national correspondent. I covered every big news story that happened in this country for a couple of decades. And it was a life experience I wouldn't trade for anything.
Indeed. Indeed. What do you feel created your passion for news?
It probably started when I was growing up here. I really enjoyed watching the local news stations. I felt like when we would tune in, there would be people like Ed Calais and Randy Atcher and Cactus and people like that. I felt like they were part of my family because I tuned in and got to see them all the time. And they always seemed so nice, so approachable. And I really started to feel like television was a great way to communicate with people. And even though when I didn't understand it at a young age, that stuck with me for a long time. And I watched Louisville television go from back in the film days to, I remember when some of the stations finally started getting electronic equipment and videotape. That was always a big thing for a station to have. And I remember when it was happening here. So Milton Metz was one of my early hero crushes, if you want to call it. I used to listen to Metz here at night when I was supposed to be either doing my homework or getting ready to go to bed. I'd have my AM radio tucked up next to my head under my pillow, listening to Metz here, either that or one of the Kentucky Colonels games. But Louisville media here for the city this size was always ahead of the curve. And they were always very creative. The people that were here always cared about their community. And that really stuck with me. I wanted to be a part of that.
Very good. And of course, your path took you away from Louisville.
Yeah. First, it wasn't by choice. My dad's job transferred him to Philadelphia when I was in high school at Seneca High School. I was in the class of 77, but I didn't get to graduate there because we moved. My dad was working in Philly. I ended up graduating from a high school in New Jersey across the river, across the Delaware River. I wasn't really happy about it at the time, but things really kind of worked out for me because that's where I ended up meeting the girl I eventually married. So that was always a good thing.
Excellent. Yeah. You want to talk more about Greta?
Just this Valentine's Day, I said something on Facebook. I was hoping it would embarrass her a little bit, but you know how you talk about your spouse being your better half? She's my better 99%.
Very nice.
We've been married now for 30 years. I don't know how she managed. It was difficult for me being away from home and being on the road as much as I had to be. But it was probably in some ways even more difficult for her being in the house and trying to maintain a household without me there. We don't have any children. So she was sort of marooned there many times when I was on the road. So I am so grateful that she's such a big part of my life, and I can't imagine life without her.
Yeah, very good. Very good. She's also a great artist.
She is, and I'm very proud of that. I'm glad I get a chance to brag on her here.
That's cool.
GretaMattingly.com. And she's done very well since we've moved to Louisville. Something that we've always remarked on when we were in Atlanta. She was an emerging artist there, and she did really well there. but people in Atlanta would seem to buy art to decorate with. They like splashy colors, and they liked landscapes and abstract scenes and things like that. And there was no emotional connection to the art when they would buy it. It was just something pretty that they want to put on the wall. Here in Atlanta, or here in Louisville, people buy art because they emotionally connect to it. So she has this big inventory of work that she has done where it's figures, people caught in a moment in life, or landscapes that show some sort of special moment that really resonate with people. And that's what people are buying here. And she loves it because that's what she loves to paint. So things have been going really well for her.
Very good. Yeah, I have some of her art here in the Rocco Museum on the wall, as you can see.
And it is awesome. You have excellent taste.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It spoke to me.
So you can imagine my house. I have a Greta Mattingly on every wall.
Indeed. Yeah. Very good. Well, that's beautiful. That's really great. I think sometimes, a lot of times when people decorate, as you said, they just kind of look for something to fill that space and maybe wait for something else to come along, and maybe it never does. But when you have stuff like that was actually made by someone living in the house, I think that's kind of the best case scenario, isn't it?
Yeah. And you know what? She approaches what she does the same way I approach what I do. It has to have a certain authenticity to it. She has to feel something about what she's putting on canvas, or else it's just a product. I have to feel something about the stories that I'm doing, or else, I'm just filling time.
Right.
I get very passionate about the work that I do. I feel like there is no such thing as a small story. And I'm always fascinated by the people I meet. And if I'm not interested in them and interested in what's happened, the audience is not going to be.
Yeah.
I think you probably see that. And that hopefully that comes through on most nights when I'm working.
I would agree. Yes, that's certainly the case. Before I met you, I was already impressed with the fact that you come across like a real news person.
Define real news person.
Well, as I was growing up, it was always the types of guys who, and women as well, I don't want to come across as sexist, but just there was a certain feeling that it's a respectable position, and it's a person who is telling you something that you need to know in as much of an unbiased way as possible, and is getting to the heart of the matter, took time before they put the story in front of you, and that the story is coming across in a way that will be as conducive as possible to you understanding the subject at the end of the night.
Well, thank you. I think that's quite a compliment.
Yeah.
I just really care about what I do, and I care about the people that I talk to and talk about. And I take my role as a journalist very seriously, in that I am helping give people information that they need to make good decisions, to be aware of what's going on in their community and their world around them. So as citizens or just as individuals, they can make good decisions.
Indeed. You mentioned living in Atlanta, and of course, that was the time that you were working with CNN.
Well, yeah, I had a house and a wife in Atlanta. I wasn't there very much.
Nice place to visit, but you didn't actually live there.
Oh, yeah. You'd always have to pack a lunch if you wanted to go across town, because you never knew what the traffic was going to do to you.
Yeah, indeed. What was the pressure like working in that field?
In CNN?
Yeah.
Well, it's a different kind of pressure than what you find in local news. In local news, the pressure is time. You never have the luxury of time. You've got a lot to do in a very short period of time. And every single day from when I walk in the door to the time that I walk out is a sprint. I am the only person in Louisville news right now who reports every night and anchors 2 evening newscasts. So my plate is full. So again, I'm constantly sprinting with the amount of work I have to get done. But with CNN, you often had the luxury of time, but there was this tremendous pressure that there was no room for error. It had to be perfect. And you were also telling stories on a much larger stage of issues that are far more complicated. And it's difficult to stick the landing, so to speak, when you're rushing toward your deadline in that type of venue.
I would imagine so. During that time, you covered some huge stories.
9/11.
Indeed.
I was actually on vacation at my mother-in-law's house in Altoona, Pennsylvania, not far from Shanksburg. or Shanksville, and I was getting ready to go fishing that day, and my wife's Aunt Sandy called the house, and she says, "Are you watching TV?" And we turned the TV on, and that was almost just minutes after the second plane had hit. And then we started hearing about a plane going down in Pennsylvania, and we had no idea what was going on. So I knew my vacation was over. It's just a matter of where was I going to end up.
Right.
I actually, once we figured out where the plane had crashed in Pennsylvania, I immediately got whatever clothes I could get, threw them in a bag, and jumped in the car and drove there. This was before CNN had issued everyone's cell phone, so I had to borrow my wife's cell phone and drove to Shanksville. I was the first network correspondent on the scene, and I ended up being there for about a week. And it was a very difficult time, not just as a journalist, but as an American and a human being. You can't tell these stories without being affected by them, particularly when you're right there on the front lines and seeing things happening.
I would imagine so. What do you do with those feelings? Do you put them into the work, or do you sort of try to work through them? Or
well, you're asking a pretty personal question there. It's been difficult for me.
Sure.
Because when you have an experience like that and there are bad things happening all around you, in order to be appropriate, for you to really understand the subject matter, for you to get what you are conveying to the audience, you have to have a certain developed level of empathy. And the downside to empathy is that once you bring it into your heart and your soul, it doesn't ever completely come out. So you end up with a patchwork or a kaleidoscope of different emotions and different experiences that a lot of people don't have. I'm very grateful for that. Some of the memories are difficult. A lot of them are filled with joy. But it's not easy a lot of times, because typically news does not send you where something good has happened.
Indeed. What is it that brought you back to Louisville?
I left CNN thinking that I would retire. I started working on a novel. I started traveling around, speaking to journalism schools around the country. And talking to all those young people in those classes really sort of lit a fire in me again. And the novel that I wrote, that I'm probably going to be in the stages of rewriting until the day I die, had to do with my family's roots here in Kentucky. I actually came up here to do some research. And while I was here, I was speaking at Bellarmine, speaking to the communication students at Bellarmine. And while I was here in Louisville, I thought, let's see if I can go visit the old stations I grew up watching. That would be a lot of fun. So I ended up going to 3 of them. And one thing led to another, and a year later, I'm working at Wave. They offered me the opportunity to come home and to essentially end my career here, bookend my career in Louisville, serving the community I grew up in.
Yeah.
How could I turn that down? It's
very, very poetic, isn't it?
I have been having the time of my life.
It seems like it.
Yeah,
it does indeed. I really love Wave 3. I occasionally find myself writing stories about people from all different stations, and I've been impressed with really everybody that I've talked to in local journalism. But Wave 3, I will confess, this far into the podcast, where the only people that are listening are the people that truly care about both you and I. That's Wave
don't
3.
Sell yourself short like that. You never know.
I just sort of want to try to create a little bit of a feeling that we're being candid here, I guess. But Wave 3 is my favorite. I really love Wave 3.
Well, thank you.
I enjoy watching it. I have often said that it is the news station that you can watch for entertainment. There's when, as long as there's no bad news, it's always pretty fun. You never know what anyone is liable to say,
especially Don G.
Especially Don G, my beloved Don G.
Those two newscasts that I have with her, that I co-anchor with her every night, is always a trial by fire. I never know what she's going to say.
Could be anything, literally. I mean, it's amazing what a for real person she is, and I know that we're both very fond of her. But when the news is not good news, it always feels like you're hearing it from a friend when you watch Wave 3.
Well, good. I hope everybody feels that way, because I have to say, getting to know everybody there at Wave, everybody that you see on the air every day, the person you see on television every night is the person I see in the newsroom every day.
Indeed. That's been my experience as well.
Everyone there is genuine. The talent level there is incredible. I believe Shannon Kogan is one of the most talented people I have ever worked with in my life. I've said that to her many times. I think Dawn G is a national treasure. The things that she does for this community is amazing. I always say that I got into journalism because I feel like every once in a while you have the opportunity to make life around you better for you or someone else. Dawn actually goes out there and does it every day. Yeah. She rolls up her sleeves. She goes out and helps people. And that's just who she is. Yeah. I mean, she is inspiring.
She has a real drive. When we first met, it was at one of her events, one of the Recipe to
Oh, yeah, that's
concerts.
Right. That's right.
I guess a couple years ago now.
You know, that's one of the values that I missed living in other places that I learned here in Louisville. I saw it in the guys who coach my Little League baseball team. I saw it in my Scoutmasters when I was in Scouts. I saw it at our church. I saw it in our high school. So many people want to be involved to make things better.
Yeah.
The volunteerism here isn't something that has to be encouraged. I mean, there are people who are ready to help at any given time. You just have to point them in the right direction.
Indeed.
And I saw that in my grandparents. They always treated strangers like they were friends, and friends like they were family. They were friends of the family that growing up I was convinced were my aunts and uncles, but I find out later there was no blood relation there whatsoever. But that's just Louisville. I thought it was my grandparents, but one of the great surprises in coming back here as an adult and living here and meeting people and experiencing the culture again as an adult was that this interest in your fellow man, the interest in making your community better, that's one of the values here that makes Louisville so wonderful.
Yeah.
It's part of the culture. I love it.
It's interesting to find that. I would imagine for you that you came back and found that something that you thought of as maybe something that you were remembering through hazy glasses is actually.
My memories of childhood were very vivid. Yeah. I love growing up here.
Yeah.
What surprised me was how small our houses were.
Right. Yeah.
They seemed a lot bigger when I was growing up in them, and how tight the neighborhoods were, how close we all were.
Yeah.
It's been great. I mean, it helped me remind me of who I am and why I am the way I am and why things are important to me when they don't seem important to other people. It's because of the experience I had growing up here.
Yeah.
And coming back, as I said before, it's just been a pure joy for me.
Yeah.
And I learn something new every day. I remember something new every day. And it's been great.
Excellent.
I can't say that enough.
Yeah, you always seem very happy whenever I see you around or we talk. It always seems like you're having a very good time at this phase of your life.
I am. And getting to go to work every day at Wave back in local television, where a lot of people in my field, after reaching the heights that I did, would look at that as a step back.
Yeah.
I looked at that as a step up.
Sure.
Because I'm having to do things under a tremendous deadline pressure every day. I have a workload that I didn't have day to day at network news, and I have to answer to my audience every night.
Yeah.
I see the people that I talk to every day when I go home, when I go to the store, when I go out to a restaurant. I like being held accountable.
Yeah.
This is a community we all share, and I like being a part of that conversation. That's something I didn't have when I worked in worked in national news.
You're just one of many in that kind of a situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I hope this doesn't sound too pretentious, but I've always found that I'm a fan, for lack of a better word, of local news. When I go somewhere that I don't live, I watch the local news just to see what it's like and sort of try to figure out how the people interact when the cameras are off and that sort of thing. I think it's almost like a kind of performance art.
In your travels, do you sort of notice sort of like a cookie cutter way that stations put their news together?
Some stations, yes.
Where you can go from one city to the next and it's just different people, but the same newscast.
Yep.
The same sound, the same look, the same feel.
Graphics.
Well, yeah.
It's always very weird when you see the same graphics.
That was the thing I enjoyed about coming to Wave, was that the people are who they are.
Yeah.
You can't label that. You can't package that. And we have an opportunity every night just to be ourselves. And Dawn really helped me come out of my shell.
Yeah.
You probably notice a big difference from the way I am on the set now as opposed to when I first got here.
Sure. Whenever anybody comes in new, there's always this learning curve at Wave. And it's always incredible to watch because I kind of know what's coming, but you don't, because Dawn is going to say something that's going to shake you up.
It wasn't just that. It was coming from the network. There's a certain way that you have to be on the air.
Yeah.
And coming to local television, it was difficult for me to be myself because I felt like I had to perform in a certain way for so long.
Sure.
That when I was called upon to be myself, it was like, how do I do that?
Right. Well, I think you've done a good job.
Actually, Dawn has done a very good job of helping me do that because she is the most genuine person I've ever seen.
Yeah, she's
on television.
There's no choice about it. And for anybody listening, if you ever feel like you want to help Dawn in some of her pursuits or some of the things that she does around the community to help people, just go to one of her events. Just show up and be prepared to just do whatever needs to be done, because she's not going to tell you to pick that heavy thing up and move it. But if you can pick that heavy thing up and move it, by all means, feel free to do that.
And if you ask if there's anything you can do, the answer will always be yes. And be prepared.
Yeah. Because there's always something. There's always something. And it's as easy to become a part of this sort of community, this family of people, that you just have to show up and help. That's all it really takes.
And what I love about being able to work with Dawn every night, she and I are the only anchor team in Louisville that was born and raised here.
Indeed.
Even though I've been gone a long time, I have gotten acclimated again very fast.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something true about being home. Everything just feels right. The accent rests just perfectly in my ear. I get what people are saying when they express themselves a certain way. And I understand why they react the way they do to certain things. I mean, this is how I've been my whole life, except I've been around people from New Jersey and Atlanta and all over the country. And now I get to be back home and I don't feel alone anymore in those regards.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's so good. You had an interesting relationship with the former governor, Matt Bevin. Not to get too far into the weeds, but how do you feel about that situation?
People ask me about Matt Bevin a lot, and my prepared answer is I found Matt Bevin to be an absolutely fascinating political figure, even when he was insulting me to my face.
Mm-hmm. May we live in interesting times. That old Chinese proverb / curse.
Yeah, well, I'm not making any political statements about him.
No, certainly you shouldn't. And I wouldn't.
He was a unique figure who was elected into office because he was unique. And as he got into office, he had a unique way of doing things. And his personality, I think, got in the way of him getting a lot of things done. I saw a level of acrimony within his own party that I had never seen in another state house, which was odd.
Yes.
But he was definitely a figure to be remembered.
Indeed. Well, that was one of the many situations that I've seen you in where I felt like you remained a consummate professional in a way that I don't know that many could.
Well, my job is to tell people what's happening. I'm not there to judge the people who are making things happen.
Right.
And that's probably what you're getting at with that statement.
Indeed.
The first time I visited the Kentucky State Capitol was on a fifth grade field trip in Jefferson County. All the school kids, I think in fifth grade, we were all loaded into buses and we all got to go visit the state capitol.
Yeah.
And we got to meet Louis Nunn, who was the governor at the time. And I remember asking him, what's the difference between a commonwealth and a state? And he seemed a little flummoxed by the question. Little did I know that that was a precursor to what would happen many years later. But the next time I was at the Capitol, I was attending this meeting. The governor was rolling out his budget, which included full funding for pensions. And he had his budget director. He was going to have his budget director meet with members of the media in a conversation which is on background, which means, okay, we don't bring cameras. We don't necessarily write an article or report on what we're hearing. It's for our own benefit. So if we have any questions to really drill down and understand what's in this massive document, fine, that's fine. Immediately before that meeting, a member of his staff walked in and said, remember, everything here is off the record, which is an entirely different thing than being on background. If something is off the record, that means it's essentially secret. I can't tell you what I heard in that room and in that meeting if I agree to those terms. So immediately I raised my hand and I said, look, I'm a journalist. If something happens in here that I need to report on, I have to be able to say who told me the information, and I'm just letting you know this now. Well, the staff member immediately accused me of being disruptive. And long story short, about 15 minutes later, 2 Kentucky state troopers were escorting me, not just out of the meeting, but out of the building, which I found a bit extreme on many levels. And I still do. That still bothers me. But part of what bothered me was that other members of the media were still sitting in there, not saying anything. So it was an interesting moment for me. And I had a similar experience when I attended a Rick Pitino press conference. I wasn't aware that there were questions that he didn't like to answer. And of course, I walk in there with questions that I think are pretty obvious, like, what exactly are you taking responsibility for when the NCAA expects the head coach to take responsibility for everything? And he wanted, in the middle of the press conference, he wanted to know who I was, who I worked for, where was I from, and which I thought was really odd. And then I find out later that that was sort of a sensitive question that he's not used to answering. So I'm not a confrontational person. I try to get my information by being upfront with people. So that was an odd experience, an odd welcome home for me, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, it's I feel like you could write a book about this.
I won't. Every journalist thinks they can write a book about their experience. Nobody likes to read that stuff.
Yeah, well, I would, for what it's worth. Maybe I'll make up a story and create a movie or something.
Here's what I tell everybody: buy me a bourbon, and I'll tell you any story you can stand to listen to. I've got a lot of them. I do.
I've got a really well-stocked liquor cabinet right over there. The sands of the hourglass are growing few, as you can see. What do you think is in the future for you? What's coming up for you in the near future?
Well, I'm loving life. I'm loving Louisville. I keep telling people I'm not going to live long enough to do everything I want to do in this town. And the one downside to working at Wave is I don't have a lot of free time.
Indeed.
So I wish I had more time to explore my home. There are weekends where my wife and I are barely in the house because we're out doing all these cool things that are going on. But that's a good problem to have.
Indeed, it is.
And Let's see how long Wave can put up with me. I will keep showing up for work as long as they want me. I'm having a great time.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine that you're in for the haul, and I'm very proud to know you. I think very highly of you. And
Well, thank you, Rocco. That's very nice of you.
Thank you for being on the show. I sure appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. All right. This is the first episode in a long time of On the Record with Rocco Jerome. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm going to promise you that I'll have another one up before the end of the year. I like to under-promise and over-deliver. Have a good day.